And we are live. This is Sound Booth Theater Live. Thank you everyone for coming. This is a special cold reads edition of Sound Booth Theater Live. Oh my god, let me start over. This is the cold reads for Legends of Arenia 2, Discovery by P.A. Parsons. Um, I'm really looking forward to getting back into this series. The first book is not quite 10 hours long. If you haven't yet, go check it out. It is on Audible right now. The link is in the description below. And yeah, this is basically a family oriented lit RPG. And oh, it looks like Paul Parsons has joined us. P.A. Parsons, the author. Can you hear me, Paul?
I can. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. We were just having a little technical difficulty earlier, but now he's back. He's ready to go. Thanks so much for coming, Paul. How you doing?
Good, good. Glad to be doing this. Always enjoy hearing your voice bring everything to life.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really already having fun with it. And yeah, can you catch us up? Can you first of all, for anyone who hasn't read or listened to your book, can you start off by telling us how this came about?
Yeah. The whole series it has its genesis in I'm a game designer as well as being a writer, and I did a VR game at the same time I was reading a lot of lit RPG, and boy is that a beast to work in because it's a real world environment essentially, right? Everything that you interact with has to have a place in the world. So whenever I'd read any sort of lit RPG where you had it just casually referred to somebody interacting with a menu, I was always like, it doesn't work like that because you need to have something that you're touching and feeling and things like
Right.
that when you make VR. And it's a huge, huge headache. So I was at work and I'm working on these problems that just like were kind of hand waved away in the books. And I was like, well, if I wrote a book, how would I contextualize all of the menus that are in a lit RPG within a book that I wrote that adhered to the actual rules of making a VR title. And I kind of in my head I was like, well, a book would make sense to contextualize everything, and you'd have a real world object to do things with, and that was the genesis of the tomes. And like that idea kind of got stuck in my head, and I ended up writing Legends of Arenia based around that. Um, and then the character of Mark also comes from I myself am epileptic, although medically controlled for years, and so his kind of person, who he is and how he interacts with the world. A lot of that comes from my own thoughts about, what would that be like if I got isekai'd into a world where I didn't have my medication, and
Right.
what would that how would that impact me in my interaction with this world? It's not something that I've ever seen before in terms of people kind of are always just assumed to either have all their health problems go away the moment they
Right.
show up, kind of like Grandpa Jack. But I've never seen anyone, have that kind of struggle that they need to deal with. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
that's where Mark comes from.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed about at least the first book, I can't speak too much to book two, but it's already, I'm already getting into the swing of it. It very much feels the same. The characters seem more fleshed out. They seem more human, for lack of a better word, than I think a lot of characters in lit RPG end up being when I read them. I feel like a lot of lit RPG sort of just has people there as placeholders, sort of like, or as I don't know if you can really have something more empty than an archetype. But that's kind of how I feel about a lot of characters in lit RPG. And not only do you take that a step, you know, towards the human direction, but it's another step to have them all in a family and all already have a family dynamic and have this deep care for each other. Was that something that you noticed was missing from the genre, or was it just something instinctive that you wanted to do anyway?
Well, I think that I liked the idea of a family. Um, so often I find in lit RPG and in fact in a lot of fiction, there's a often either a me against the world feeling, or there's it's somebody on a current and you interact with rocks along the way, and everything is contextualized by your interaction with it. And even in multiple POV, lit RPG often, you know, people have gone there on their own and then they've interacted with other people while they're there, or if it's VR based, it's usually a group of friends. But you it's that whole, you can pick your friends but you can't pick your family.
Hmm.
And it allows for me to generate characters who are who have some similarities but also some distinct differences. And so it's a bit of a cheat code for when I'm creating those characters where we all come from families of different complexity, and we bring that experience into reading the book. And so I can have them feel differently and interact differently, and it resonates with people, and hopefully, and it allows me to get that new layer of interaction between the characters that's a bit more human, because they're bringing something into the world with them that I don't necessarily have to set up like I do an interaction with a new character, who they haven't interacted with before. Who like there's a character that I bring into this book named Naomi, who I need to generate that from scratch, and it's a lot
Hmm.
harder than it is to say, you know, this is a father and a son, and they have some difficulties with each other that they need to get through, and you just know what that's like. Everyone's got family
Yeah.
members that they're like, that person's a bit of a struggle, but I don't have a choice but to deal with them.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I find those kinds of interactions, I mean, family interaction versus friendship interaction, because of that, because there's really sort of, you don't have a choice. You just have to deal with it, and I feel like there's more creativity that needs to be generated in order to make that work in a believable way for people than it takes to just, oh well, these two characters like each other and so they stick around each other.
Mhm.
It's just they're kind of free to be who they are. Whereas with the family dynamic, when they're kind of forced to care for each other, it's like there's more problem solving involved there.
Yeah. I actually had somebody in my Patreon asked me, or in my Discord, sorry, asked me about my outlining process and what I do. And I said, like, what I spent a lot of time doing when I first started writing these books is really understanding the characters and writing a lot about their, who they are and how they think and what their personalities are like. And then when I outline, I do very broad strokes. I say what I want a person's character arc to be like from beginning to end, and what I want the story arc to be from beginning to end. But when I actually do the writing, I like to think that because I've understood who the characters are, I leave a lot of room for them to surprise me, and to, as I write, they react based on my understanding of how they would react, and then it allows for more organic interaction between them and each other in the world around them. Um, Sometimes when I do stuff on Royal Road, people call me out on it. If they feel like somebody is not acting like a normal person, I really appreciate that. I've rewritten a couple of sections because I'm like, you know what? I started to shoehorn something in that didn't fit, and because it wasn't true to the character. But I think that if you really understand your characters, they will tell you how they would react in a situation that you can't. That is a lot harder to do if you're just kind of trying to really rigidly lay out the story and just force someone down that path.
Yeah, yeah. It's so great. I think Royal Road has been such a huge asset for authors, because of exactly what you just said. You get kind of instant feedback, chapter by chapter, pretty much, and people will call you out on your shit. Has that been a big part of the process for you from the get go, or have has is that something that you've discovered along the way?
Yeah, no, it's I decided I want to do, like, I don't know how these some of the authors on Royal Road do a chapter multiple days a week and do the whole thing. I mean, like, that's beyond me. I mean, that's how like that's how Charles Dickens wrote, and he's one of the greatest writers of all time. I can't do that. I have to write my whole story and understand it and write the whole thing, and then I put it out on Royal Road. But uh, I did that because like I wanted to have that community interaction and seeing how people reacted to things. And it is risky. I don't know if that's the right word, because you can lose people if they hit a chapter that they're like, this isn't working for me. And sometimes you'll get, I have the one chapter where when Mark and Angela go to the Mages College, I completely missed the mark the first time I did it, and I had to rewrite it 3 or 4 times before, like, I felt like people on Royal Road really, you know, were happier with it, and that's so valuable because I didn't have to get it out into the world and have people give me 3-star reviews on Amazon
Hmm.
and just completely tank the book because I muffed the punt on this one section. So like I'm wildly happy with my interaction with Royal Road, and I kind of don't consider a chapter complete until it's gone up on there and had feedback and
Yeah.
I've revised.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, to address something that you just said, clearly not every author on Royal Road is Charles Dickens. Um, I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is that most authors, uh, they just maybe they don't think as much about what they're doing as you do. I mean, I'm noticing a lot of people in the lit RPG genre, a lot of authors in the lit RPG genre are pantsers, right? Which, for anyone who doesn't know, that's a term for an author who doesn't necessarily have a very fleshed out plan from the get go, and they just kind of write, they just go, and they kind of let things happen. And in order to take that attitude, uh, you kind of just have to not be the kind of person who outlines at all. I mean, I've heard, some authors have a mix, right? They'll start off with an outline, but it's a very vague outline, but they're still technically pantsing. But it sounds like you just said you don't even start posting to Royal Road until the book it has a full draft, right?
No, I mean, I think it partially comes from my game background, from my
Mm-hmm.
game development background, because there's a very um, there's a very mercenary approach to the creative process in games, where you're dealing with so many restrictions in terms of resources and time and deadlines, and things get cut all the time. There's a saying in games that a game is finished, it's just done. uh, or a game is this game is never done, it's finished. Where
Right.
basically the game you release is not the game you want to, it's the game you can get done in the time that you have. And what we dream up in pre-pro, and what gets released at the end, we never get everything we want. But one of the results of that is that when you work in that field, you need to be ruthless with what you have, and you need to look at something, you need to be able to say, this isn't working, it's gone. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest things that I brought into my writing, was the that ruthless aspect of being able to look at my writing and say, this isn't working, it's cut. And I've had books where I had my first book I ever wrote, which didn't go up, but I cut 40,000 words at one point, just because I'm like, this, I've gone on completely awry here, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
roll it back and I'm going to redo it, and I'll cut sections. um, you can't do that if you go straight to Royal Road. You don't have that freedom. And I don't know that I would be the writer that I want to be if I did it that way. And I need to have the freedom of the scalpel in order to really feel like I'm maximizing my ability.
Yeah, I think that that's an attitude that's not very common amongst, especially indie writers now who, I think if you're in the world of indie authors and you're listening to a lot of the, people that are very influential in this realm, I think a lot of them would say, "Hey, that's waste." Right? That could have been a whole, you could have already had 4 or 5 books out and have been generating revenue and getting fans and all that. And they have a point, except the end product doesn't turn out as well as I think it does with your method, where it's like, no, this doesn't work, I'm cutting it. No, like this, you're constantly criticizing yourself and you're trying to condense this thing into something that is more pure, right, and gets to the point that you want it to better than say like, hey, I'm just releasing stuff. Hopefully people like it. I'm sticking, I'm putting these features in that I know that people like, and so I know they'll respond well to it, and they pick it up. And then we have this weird thing. Like I've always been bewildered, especially since I've always just been in the indie author environment, at how much uh, typos are dismissed by the audience. They don't care. It's fine. And like for me, it drives me crazy when I when I see typos. I feel like it makes me feel like this author didn't put the work in. You know, but for most readers, they're like, yeah, whatever. Nom, 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 nom. Um, so I'm but like, in my opinion, again, like I'm that kind of reader. I want the carefully crafted, very specific experience that only an author who truly cares about the craft itself can deliver. So I just want to say thank you for taking that attitude and going against the grain in that sense. I mean, the consequences are book one. How long ago did that release?
That released in, I guess the very end of 20, it was 2024 right now, end of 2022. So it was
No, we're in 2023 right now, so it would have
oh,
been
sorry, it's the
2021.
24th of 2023 of February. Sorry, in the end of 2022. So I wanted to get it out in a year, but I missed the mark on that.
Okay, so what are we looking at as far as a Kindle release on book two?
I did just release it on Kindle.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to
Yes.
get that link from you then.
Yes. I must have not sent you.
All right, yeah, send me that link. I'll make sure to add that to the description of this YouTube video once I'm done, and I'll add it to the description of part one. And I think actually, how many words are we looking at for this book two?
It's more meaty than book one for sure.
Yeah,
It's 100 and like shy of 160. It's 158,000.
158. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Book one was 94.
yeah, I mean, there's a good chance I'm actually going to be doing four, maybe even five cold reads for this one because it's just a bigger chunk. I kind of have this arbitrary number. I usually just do the first 30% as cold reads. So uh, like I said, I really appreciate the series. I really appreciate how it's meticulously put together and polished. So again, thank you for that. And we'll everyone, if you like this interview and you like this cold read and you can't wait to get a hold of the audio and you just want to read the book, book one's on audio. Book two is already released on Amazon. I will be putting that link in the description here. But also, we're going to be running a Kickstarter very soon. I'm thinking once it's time, once we're ready to launch the Kickstarter, we'll be taking book one of Arenia, non-exclusive to Audible. It'll still be there. Still be there. So don't worry if any of you guys who are just adamant about sticking to one audiobook platform, but we will be bringing book one to SBT Direct. And at that point, we'll be launching a Kickstarter so that we can see about getting a cinematic audio version of book one funded. So I'm very excited about that aspect. We've got a bunch of concept art that's been made now and ready to go. We have plans for paperback. Are we planning to do a hardback of book one? I can't remember.
It's in paperback. You can get it. Not, I
Right,
don't
right.
think a hardback, that would be insanely expensive, but
Okay,
but you can get a physical copy. Yeah, for both
right.
book one and book two.
So for Kickstarter, we'll have posters, a journal, like Jack's. I think it was Jack's journal that we decided to Jack's tome that we decided to make a replica of for you guys to get. And there's going to be plenty of extra goodies that are involved in the Kickstarter. So everybody, watch out for that. Subscribe to our newsletter at soundbooththeater.com to get updates on that. And we're going to try and make a big deal out of this. So thanks again, Paul, for choosing us as your audiobook production guys. I'm really looking forward to continuing this book. You got anything else that you wanted to say to people before we go on?
No, no. I, I'm looking forward to hearing book two.
Awesome. All right, so I'm gonna get started narrating. Paul, you can hang out if you want to, and feel free to rudely interrupt me if I get anything wrong. I have no problems with that whatsoever. If like I pronounce something wrong, or if you notice that I'm voicing someone incorrectly, I do my best to go back and reference things. But it has been a while since I narrated book one.
Yeah,
Um,
and I will send you a pronunciation guide for the stuff later on, just to so you don't need to bug me all the time. And well, how I did
awesome.
before, how I sent you vocal clips of
Right, right,
all
right.
the different things.
Perfect. Thanks again, Paul. And
All right.
yeah, please feel free to stick around if you want to. If not, have a good one.
Yeah. All right. I will hang around, but I'll turn off my camera and
Cool.
people don't need to look at my mug. All right.
Alrighty.
Thanks.
All right, guys, starting on chapter 2 of Discovery, book 2 of the Legends of Arenia. Again, check the description below if you want to find book 1 on Audible. Book 2 is already out on Amazon, the Kindle version. So go search for that if you are just absolutely too anxious to wait for the audio and you must know what happens. And again, Paul has written a much. I mean, book 1 wasn't even 100,000 words. Book 2 being almost 160. That's quite a big leap. So you're getting a lot more bang for your buck by picking up book 2. All right, and here goes. Chapter 2. From then to now. Peter watched the kids disappear upstairs, then followed his wife as she headed down the hallway and into the kitchen. When he got there, she was peering around the empty room, her eyebrows pulled down and her nose scrunched up as she took in the sight. He laughed, pulling her over and kissing her on the head. What? She said, looking at him askance. He smiled. Honey, we have no money and no idea what furniture costs. We don't even know what furniture looks like in this place. For all we know, everyone nails it to the ceiling. She said. Oops. I can still think about it. Oops. I can still think about it. Besides, are you planning on decorating the house? Absolutely not, he said with a grin. Which means? That I should keep my mouth shut about furniture unless I'm contributing? Bingo, she said. She stepped over to the counter and hopped up, sitting facing him with her legs dangling off the side while Peter took up position opposite her, leaning against the center island. I'm not wrong. We have no money, and our renown is abysmal. We couldn't even eat tonight if it weren't for the last of our pack rations. Oh, I'm definitely aware. If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. He hesitated. He had one idea, but he knew she wouldn't like it. I know that look, she said, leaning forward. Out with it. What are you thinking? He grimaced. Right now, I'm thinking that we're both tired and it's probably not the best time. Peter? Okay. Since you ask, what I'm really thinking is that I should look into working for one of these families. She reacted exactly how he'd expected. Eliza explicitly said that was a bad idea. You can't do that. We have no idea of the implications of that kind of decision. I agree, he said, nodding his head. We absolutely have to get more information before we jump into anything. But it sounds like these families control all the agriculture, which is where my expertise lies. Who knows? Maybe I can just contract out my services without becoming an employee. Beth scowled. Indeed. How could laundering money for multiple competing gangs possibly go poorly for us? Oh, come on, he said, crossing his arms. We're talking about planning and selling crops, not money laundering. And this isn't some criminal underworld either. From the sounds of it, these families are the literal government of Palmyre. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. I know I'm reacting strongly. Oops. She said before opening her eyes again. But this is very stressful. We just made it to Palmyre, and I don't want to make any mistakes that have long-term consequences. He gave her a tired smile. I know, honey. None of us do. He walked over and wrapped his arms around her, holding her as she lay her head on his chest. We'll make it work. You know we will. Just look at the kids. She pulled her head back and looked up at him, a quirky smile on her lips. Did you hear what Angela said? She can do magic. Our daughter. Magic. I don't know whether I should be proud of her or terrified for the people of Palmyre. He said with a shudder. He looked upstairs through the ceiling to where their kids were. I was going to ask her to show us some, but I don't get the impression we're wanted right now. It's good for them to talk. Although Angela's probably cursing like a sailor. If anything warrants a few F-bombs, it's being murdered by a bunny rabbit. Sailor. If anything warrants a few F-bombs, it's being murdered by a bunny rabbit. If nothing else, it's proof that irony still exists on Arenia. It took a moment for Peter to work out what she was referring to, but when he did, he burst out laughing. Oh, God. I didn't even think about that. Somewhere, somehow, Snuff Out is laughing his butt off. That rabbit's name was Snuffles, and it was an accident. A pretty horrifying one. She shuddered in his arms. Ugh, no argument there. Giving her a quick kiss on the forehead, Peter took a step back. Well, I want to get prepared for bed while there's still some light. It's not like this place is wired for electricity. She poked him in the chest. And while you're setting up the bedrolls, I will have a bath. The way she emphasized bath made it sound like a 3-hour trip to the spa. Let's try that again. And while you're setting up the bedrolls, I will have a bath. The way she emphasized. It's a bad sign that I didn't prioritize that higher, isn't it? Probably. Beth scowled slightly, taking his bandaged arm and gently pressing on it. He flinched. I know you don't want to talk about how this happened, but... The details aren't important, he said, his dark memories making his voice firmer than he intended. Let's try that again. I know you don't want to talk about how this happened, but... The details aren't important. Let's try one more time. How this happened, but... The details aren't important. There we go. But... The details aren't important, he said, his dark memories making his voice firmer than he intended. He didn't want to think about that fight with the goblins, to picture the look in his wife's eyes if she discovered how he'd been so enraged after seeing her hurt that he'd beaten the perpetrator beyond recognition with his bare hands, how he'd yanked the goblin's dagger out of his own arm and stabbed the thing over and over until Eliza forced him to stop. She patted his hand gently, unaware of his thoughts. Be that as it may, We need to find you some... Be that as it may, we need to find you some soap so we can clean and redress this.
Good idea, he said with a tight smile. Who knows what kind of weird bacteria exist in this place. In the meantime, you enjoy your bath.
I will. I'd invite you in, but that would be disgusting. I'd invite you in, but that would be disgusting. Damn it. I'd invite you in, but that would be disgusting considering how dirty we are.
Not to mention it would traumatize the kids.
They're in their 20s. How much more can we traumatize them at this point?
A lot. Now go.
He chuckled as she gave him a wink and headed down the hall. Soon the sounds of running water emanated from inside the washroom, so he headed to the sitting room and grabbed their bags, only to remember the kids were talking upstairs.
Probably best to leave them alone,
he thought to himself. With nothing else to do, he took a seat and leaned against the wall. Then he closed his eyes and reveled in the fact that for the first time in a week, he could really, truly relax. God, what a great interaction between these two characters. I love the dynamic there. Here it is. Looks like I'll go ahead and drop this the link to the Kindle version of this book in the comments here. But again, after I'm done with this cold read, I'm gonna actually put the link in the description, so anyone listening afterwards, you'll find it there. Excuse me. Hey, what's up, Josh? Good to see you. Mark led Angela up to the second floor and gestured around lazily. There's 3 rooms on this floor, and Mom and Dad will take the loft upstairs. I'm sure we'll give the one at the back of the house to Grandpa Jack. It has a nice view of the backyard and saves him the extra flight of stairs. As for our rooms, I don't really have a preference, so take your pick. Angela scrunched up her face. Maybe we should convert that sitting room downstairs into a bedroom? It's been 15 years since Grandpa Jack slept on the second floor. Mark nodded. Good point. Although knowing Mom, she's probably already on top of it. You're probably right. Come on, I want to see the loft. So they don't even know. They don't even know that he's, Oh, this link will let people buy the book in any store and in their own region. Okay. Here's one more link, guys, in case you prefer it over Amazon. Oops. Nope. That was still the Amazon link. What happened? Copy. Here we go. Sorry about that, guys. All right. Yeah, so they don't know that Grandpa Jack is jacked. He's a young man again, at least in body. So they're like, oh, let's make sure he doesn't have to go up the stairs. Come on, I want to see the loft. Yeah, for sure, he said, leading her up a narrow, steep stairwell that released a cacophony of creaks and thumps with every step. He said, leading her up a narrow, steep stairwell that released a cacophony of creaks and thumps with every step as his feet and staff strained the old wooden stairs. It was a short trip, though, and soon he emerged through an opening in the middle of the loft floor with Angela right behind him, nodding appreciatively. This ain't too shabby, she said. Mark tended to agree. One side of the ceiling sloped down, matching the contour of the roof, but the rest was nice and open, with French doors at the back that opened onto a balcony overlooking the yard. His sister walked over to the balcony and looked outside, nodding to herself, then turned back towards him. All right, spill it. You obviously want to get something off your chest without Mom and Dad knowing, and those floors are squeaky enough that we'll hear them coming. What's going on? He grimaced and sighed. He wanted to talk about it, but how the hell was he supposed to explain everything that had happened? Let's give that some space. What's going on? He grimaced and sighed. There we go. But how the hell was he supposed to explain everything that had happened? Blah. That bad? Yeah. He went and joined her on the balcony, leaning against the railing as he looked out over the river. His gloved hands gripped the staff in front of him tightly as he shook his head slowly. Shit went down, Angie. A silence stretched out between them. Eventually, Angela reached over and patted him on the arm. I'm sure it felt good to get that off your chest. Mark burst into laughter. Off your chest. Mark burst into laughter. You always approach things with the proper sense of gravity, sis. And you walk around with a stick up your butt. Come on, let's hear it. Whatever happened, happened. Sometimes the hero gets thrown a curveball and they have to get past it if they're going to succeed. You think I'm the hero of this story? No, that's clearly me, but even supporting characters can be entertaining in small doses. She said, grinning. He rolled his eyes, then considered the staff clutched in his hands. How about we start with something simple? He handed her the weapon, its length the color of aged ivory, one end broken off and blackened. Cool, she said, taking it from him. Did you make this? In a manner of speaking. She looked closely at the blackened end, poking at it in several spots. Guess this is the part you stick people with? Kinda weird texture. It looks like burnt wood, but it's super hard. Way sharper than I'd have expected, too. You think that's the weird part? He said. Taking his glove off, he reached out and grabbed the staff. Immediately, the strange, hair-width iridescent whirls burst into being, drawing and erasing themselves across the yellowed wood. Holy shit! Excuse me. She yelped, jumping back and letting go of the staff. That is so awesome! How did you... Her eyes widened when she noticed the markings weren't just on the wood. They were also crawling over the flesh of his hand and arm where it gripped the staff. Dude, what the fuck is going on with your hand? I already told you. Shit went down. Yeah, I'm still gonna need you to get more specific. So, he told her about how he'd been pulled into the fog and chased by the twisted spirits, how he had killed one, then fallen into the ground and gotten sucked into that orb of unfettered power before being tossed outside, waking up without knowing how he got there. Wounds healed and staff in hand, but with more Wounds healed and staff in hand. Sorry, Paul, I'm having problems with this sentence. Wounds healed. Is this... Oh, I get it. It's just, okay. But with wound. It's a continuation of the last sentence. Waking up without knowing how he got there. Wounds healed and staff in hand, but with more questions than answers. Got there. Wounds healed and staff in hand. And the tome said it couldn't see you in there? She asked when he was done. No. Apparently I was invisible. Man, what I wouldn't give to get off those fuckers' radar for a bit. Maybe I should head over there too. Don't even joke, he said, shaking his head at her. That fog has been there for thousands of years, and from the sounds of it, I'm the first person to ever make it out. Seriously? What makes you different? It was a good question. One he'd thought about at length. Whether he liked it or not, there was only one answer he could come up with that made sense. Excuse me. Okay, this is going to sound super weird, but I think it's my epilepsy. Say what now?
He nodded.
Say what now? But I think it's my epilepsy. Say what now?
He nodded.
No, not quite. But I think it's my epilepsy. Say what now? But I think it's my epilepsy. Say what now? There we go, that's the one.
He nodded.
Think about it. We've both read enough fantasy novels to know what I found in there.
Angela threw her hands up in the air.
Yeah, dude, it's fucking chaos. You fell into a ball of raw chaos. That kind of shit does not happen on page 1 of the story. What were you thinking? I didn't do it on purpose. Of course not. You're not an idiot, but... Your epilepsy? How would that help anything?
He let out a sigh and leaned on his staff.
Because a seizure is basically your brain firing in a chaotic mess. I bet that thing in the fog took one look inside my head and said, "Hey, twinsies!" Because a seizure is basically your brain firing in a chaotic mess. Okay. Because a seizure is basically your brain firing in a chaotic mess. I bet that thing in the fog took one look inside my head and said, "Hey, twinsies!" Ugh. His voice is going higher, though, which is not good. Because a seizure is basically your brain firing in a chaotic mess. I bet that thing in the fog took one look inside my head and said, "Hey, twinsies!" There we go.
Angela's brow pursed.
But you haven't had a seizure since they got your meds all sorted. Yeah, tell that to the grand mal I had about 10 seconds after I thought that... Yeah, tell that to the grand mal... Yeah, tell that to the grand mal I had about 10 seconds after I fought that dire rat.
Her eyes went wide.
What? Holy shit, man, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Me too.
According to that voice we heard when we were hovering above Arenia, Verna was her name, I think, Earth medicine doesn't work on Arenia, which means that when I got here...
She started shaking her head rapidly.
Please don't say what I think you're going to say.
The meds in my system stopped working. She winced.
Forced cold turkey? That's brutal.
Tell me about it.
My brain has been a mess since I got here, but like I said, I think the only reason I survived that fog was because I was having a seizure when it pulled me in. Dude,
Angela said, rubbing the back of her neck and wincing.
The idea of chaos taking an interest in you makes me pretty fucking uncomfortable.
I guess. But I'm not even sure that glowing ball thing was alive. I think it just reacted to the weird resonance in my head and glitched the fuck out of... Let's try that again. I think it just reacted to the weird resonance in my head and glitched the fuck out of my tome. She chuckled and shook her head.
Which led to you waking up outside the fog with a new class and a bitchin' weapon. Legendary.
Yeah, well, my tome guide kind of flipped out over it. Apparently, it's supposed to be impossible to have a class forced upon you, but this thing, primal, they called it, basically makes its own rules. Something in what he'd said must have gotten Angela's mind going, because her eyebrows abruptly pursed and she looked at him very intently. It was almost uncomfortable to be stared at with such focus, but not as uncomfortable as when she grabbed his ears and started shaking his head as a way of punctuating her next words.
Bro, you can never, ever tell anyone about this.
Words.
Bro, you can never, ever tell anyone about this. Bro, you can never, ever tell anyone about this.
Pulling his head back out of her reach, he said, "Why not? Why not? Do you know what the people around us think of chaos? For all we know, these people's creation myth says that chaos is the source of all evil. They could kill you on the spot if they knew what happened." Oh. I probably should have thought of that. She dragged a hand down her face, looking at him over her fingertips. You didn't tell anyone, did you? You didn't tell anyone, did you? No, but mostly because of my tome. Given how it reacted, I thought it best to not mention it for the time being. Well, good, she said. She gave him a nudge. Probably want to crank up that intelligence stat. Can't have you making boneheaded mistakes. Mark scowled. I have a luck of 12. Intelligence isn't going to be the reason this secret gets out. 12? Angela said, raising her eyebrows. Woof! Fair point, then. The siblings sat in silence as they mulled over Mark's revelation. So, are you like a sorcerer or something now? She asked, breaking the silence. I think so. That isn't the name I was given. What is it called again? Oh. Grand Mal is pronounced as one piece rather than grand being an adjective modifying mal. Okay, and martum is the word. Let's see. That isn't the name I was given, but maybe martum is a junior class of some sort. That isn't the name I was given, but maybe... That isn't the name I was given, but maybe martum is a junior class of some sort. And let me go find that. Grand Mal. We're on page what now? We're on page 48. That fog has been... Okay, think about it. Because... Yeah! Tell that to the Grand Mal I had about 10... Where'd it go? Yeah! Yeah, tell that to the Grand Mal I had about 10 seconds after I fought that dire rat. Her eyes went wide. There we go.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so you would... don't bite off the D at the end of Grand Mal. You'd say it like it's one word. Like, I had a Grand Mal.
Okay, one sec. Let me try it again. Where'd it go? Tell that to the Grand Mal I had about... Yeah, tell that to the Grand Mal I had about 10 seconds after I fought that dire rat.
Perfect.
Like all right, great. Thank you. Maybe martum is a junior class of some sort. Angela pulled her head back. Wait, you can read that shit? Read what? Those squiggly lines you have instead of a class? Kind of like what's on your staff, now that I think about it. Mark frowned. Pulling out his tome, he opened it to his profile page and flipped it around to face his sister. Mark Sullivan. Renown, level 10, martum. Species, human. Age, 20. Experience, 19,450. Experience to next level, 2,850. Base attributes: Strength, 19. Constitution, 19. Endurance, 18. Dexterity, 18. Willpower, 19. Intelligence, 17. Charisma, 14. Luck, 12. Average, 17. Abilities: Boon. Class compensation. Boon. Deus Ex Machina. Traits: Evolving. Human. General skills: Tier 2. Riding, 22. Tier 1. Jumping, 11. Tier 0. Rope use, 6. Survival skills: Tier 1. Hiking, 13. Tier 0. Field medicine, 6. Running for your life, 5. Sense danger, 4. Fighting styles: Tier 0. Brawling, 1. Active quests: Find Grandpa Jack, Part 2. Class: What the hell are you? Part 1. You're telling me you can't read my class?
No, dude. Not at all. It sounds like martyrdom when you say it, but that ain't what's written.
Super. Looks like we're in one of those I can read a language nobody else can situations. Too bad I can't understand it.
If it makes you feel any better, I'm kinda in the same boat.
He raised an eyebrow at her.
My runes,
She said, tapping herself on the chest.
Druid, remember? They're how I do magic. My runes,
She said. That piqued Mark's interest. Seriously? How does it work? Angela brightened.
It's pretty sweet. I had this one rune that... Oh my god, I totally forgot!
In a flash, his sister's tome appeared, clattering to the floor with a thud. She immediately dropped down beside it, shuffling through the stone slabs as she hunted for something. What did you forget?
When my class advanced to full druid, there was a notification that said there were some changes,
She said without looking up.
I haven't gotten a chance to read them. When my class advanced to full druid, there was a notification that said there were some changes,
She said without looking up.
I haven't gotten a chance to read them, though, so just give me a sec and I'll see what they added.
Before long, Angela's search ended with her triumphantly holding up a sheet of pink-tinged marble.
Here we go. Okay, let's see how all this works.
Mark shook his head. Angie, so help me God, if you have tutorial information in your tome, I am going to smash that thing over your head. Over your head.
I wish. I've had to muddle my way through this just like you. Hell, I had to work out my whole spellcasting mechanic after falling out of a tree and breaking like 40% of the bones in my body.
Wait, what? She looked up and raised an eyebrow at... She looked up and raised an eyebrow at him.
Dude, you've seen my injuries to date page. I didn't get all that from being overhugged by kittens. Dude, you've seen my injuries to date page. I didn't get all that from being overhugged by kittens.
Her attention returned to the slab of tome in her lap, so Mark waited, watching as her expression shifted from excited to confused and on to panicky. Tossing the pink-tinged slab off to the side, she picked up a different one. Rapidly skimming through the contents before returning to the original slab. Then she moved on to a different one and repeated the routine, bouncing back and forth for a good 30 seconds before finally sighing in resignation and looking at her. Well, fuck. Oh, looking at her brother. Oops. Then she
I don't know how I mixed that up.
Then she
moved on to a different one and repeated the routine, bouncing back and forth for a good 30 seconds before finally sighing in resignation and looking at her brother.
Well, fuck.
Brother.
Well, fuck.
Her brother.
Well, fuck.
All right. Next chapter. We are blazing right through this one. Chapter 3. Leave takings. Leave takings. Jack finished the last of what he'd come to think of as ligament stew, the disgusting slurry that made up a Kiandir. Paul, you remember how I pronounce this one?
Chiandir.
Chiandir, okay. Chiandir.
Harder on the E, hard E. Chiandir.
Chiandir, got it. All right, and I should go ahead and refresh Jack's voice for myself. Let's see here. I gotta go back to it. I was signed into the wrong profile. Here it is.
Chapter 7. Jack. There was a flash as the world abruptly stopped racing up at Jack's feet, and he found himself standing on a bed of pine needles, a stone's throw from the precipice of a rocky cliff. The sun was hot, the air was clean, and the turkey in his hand had just lost its mind. The turkey bellowed, flapping so wildly that it finally freed itself from Jack's grip and sprinted away, looking back to see if Jack was pursuing it. Which was too bad. If it had been looking forward, maybe it wouldn't have run straight off the cliff. Jack watched as the turkey disappeared. As someone who had hunted quite a bit in his youth, he was well aware that unlike wild turkeys, domesticated ones couldn't fly. "Good riddance," he muttered. Sticking his hands on his hips, Jack's attention was drawn to the strange feel of the fabric beneath his fingers. Looking down, he saw that his earthen clothes had been replaced with items made of some sort of rough, homespun cloth like his mother had made in his youth. It was a decent cut and gave him a welcome sense of nostalgia. He could also feel the weight of a rucksack on his shoulders, which was good. This would be easier with some supplies. Jack took in his surroundings. "I have no goddamned idea where I am."
All right, I think I got it.
The disgust. Of as ligament stew. The
Chiandir, okay.
The disgusting slurry that made up a Chiandir's morning meal. The disgusting slurry that made up a Chiandir's morning meal. It was filling, yes, and being fed was always better than being eaten, but that didn't change the fact that it was flat-out awful. If he hadn't lived through the Great Depression, it would probably be the worst thing he'd ever eaten. When he had commented to Canis... Canis or Canis? Look them up. Let's see. Magic, the Fog, the Chiandir. Chapter 15. The Chiandir. When Jack awoke on the third morning of his journey with the Chiandir, the war party's mood had picked up noticeably. Chances were, most folks from Earth wouldn't have noticed, Chiandir body language being what it was, but Jack could feel it in the air. It was like during the war, when you broke camp before heading away from the front. It was all the same chores, but everyone was so damn happy that it bled into the air. As the war party got close to their destination, Jack marveled at the trees that surrounded them. When he had arrived on Arenia, the forest was mostly just pine with a few spruce until they were a frenzy that intertwined seamlessly. Never one to keep his eyes straight ahead, Jack noticed that there were other Chiandir hidden in the bushes around them. They were armed to the teeth and keeping a close eye on Canis's war party as they approached.
Canis, okay.
At first, it seemed odd himself to be.
Yes, we will be there soon.
Canis.
Got it. All right. When he had commented to Canis about it disagreeing with his system, the Chiandir had been insistent, explaining that only eating muscle meat would make a person sick in the long run. Apparently, you had to eat all the joints, organs, marrow, you name it, to get the right nutritional balance from an all-meat diet. Which was good to know, but it sure as hell didn't make the stuff taste any better.
Are you done, my friend? Are you done, my friend?
Canis asked, as Jack reached the bottom of his bowl.
Looks like it,
he answered, spooning up the last of the cartilaginous. Cartilaginous?
Cartilaginous is good.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yep. Cartilaginous.
He answered, spooning up the last of the cartilaginous. He answered, spooning up the last of the cartilaginous. He answered, spooning up the last of the why am I having a hard time? Cartilaginous. The last of the cartilaginous. The last of the cartilaginous. So that's why it's a problem. Okay. He answered, spooning up the last of the cartilaginous mess as he tried to ignore the burning spice that clung to his tongue.
I ain't normally one to criticize another culture's cuisine, but you folks need to work out a better way to season this stuff. I thought you liked Garu,
Canis said with a grin, his large canines gleaming in the morning sun. He lifted the bowl of dried red flakes that the Chiandir used to season their food and shook it in Jack's direction.
If you eat it from birth, I assure you it is delicious. Now come, we must visit the elders before you leave us.
The huge Chiandir war leader rose from the bench and Jack followed suit, the pair heading out of the dining area with only a quick stop to toss their bowls into the barrel of rust-colored grubs that... The huge Chiandir war leader rose from the bench, and Jack followed suit, the pair heading out of the dining area with only a quick stop to toss their bowls into the barrel of rust-colored grubs that passed for a dishwasher in the village. The grubs wash the dishes. Okay, let me try that again. The huge Chiandir war leader rose from the bench, and Jack followed suit, the pair heading out of the dining area with only a quick stop to toss their bowls into the barrel of rust-colored grubs that passed for a dishwasher in the village. The huge Chiandir war leader rose from the bench, and Jack followed suit, the pair heading out of the dining area with only a quick stop to toss their bowls into the barrel of rust-colored grubs that passed for a dishwasher in the village. Not only did the things eat away at the leftover food until the stone plates were spotless, but they also bred like crazy. When there got to be too many, the Chiandir would dry them out and grind them up to sprinkle on their food like red chili flakes, also known as the flavoring they called garu. Damn things tasted like chili flakes too, if not hotter. Jack had never been one for spicy food, but the Chiandir had stuck a whole mess of them in his pack anyway under the misguided impression that he liked the things. Unsurprising, considering how much he put on that damned stew. It was the only way to kill the taste. The duo headed out of the dining area and made their way across the village, with Jack doing his best to ignore the looks he got from the Chiandir as they passed. Apparently, word had gotten out that he'd used Speak with the Dying to prevent Pash from kicking the bucket during his Not sure. Apparently, I don't remember if that was Pash or Posh.
Pash.
Pash? Okay. Apparently, word had gotten out that he'd used Speak with the Dying to prevent Pash from kicking the bucket during his evolution to warrior, and now they were staring at him like a bunch of wide-eyed loonies. Jack grimaced at the attention. At first, he'd been okay with staying another night, but now that everyone was acting weird, he was ready to get going. Upon reaching the edge of the village, Jack saw that Elders Novus and Queso were waiting for them, as was Sextus. The old warrior sat calmly on the ground with the stumps of his legs sticking out in front of him, his demeanor so composed that he made it look like Chiandir's legs fell off naturally once they reached a certain age. Okay, good.
You skipped an A in there. It looks like A Chiandir's legs rather than...
Sticking out in front of him, his demeanor so composed that he made it look like Chiandir... Ah, yes. The old warrior sat calmly on the ground, with the stumps of his legs sticking out in front of him, his demeanor so composed that he made it look like a Chiandir's legs fell off naturally once they reached a certain age. Of course, being 5 feet tall, sitting down, probably helped. Alright, so I gotta go look up these other character voices. Let's see, Novus, Queso, and Sextus.
You're going to want the Death as Life chapter. I don't remember which number it is.
Yeah, it's nice that you have them named. Oops. In the 2 days since Jack arrived at the Chiandir village, he hadn't been left alone for an instant. Hell, he didn't even get to leave the hut unless it was for communal meals or to relieve himself.
Let's try 10%.
Then, only moments ago, "War leader may cross that threshold."
Me,
Jack said.
I figure Pash likely has some thoughts on the matter.
The gathered elders laughed, and Canis managed to look embarrassed.
This is not possible,
Novus said.
Okay.
If you went inside the
I
hut,
remember her name.
you would see why.
So that's Novus, and now we need Sextus.
You'll need Queso as well.
And Queso, okay.
Queso and Novus are in the same section. Sextus is just after that.
Oh, I see. Okay, maybe I should just keep listening here.
Jack gritted his teeth. He did not like being laughed at. They were clearly trying to back him into a corner, but they didn't need to get their rocks off in the process.
If you're looking for
Maybe I'll
your
do that.
pass for dialogue.
Oh.
Then we'll decide what's possible.
They soon noticed Queso and Jack's approach, and he immediately picked up on the somber mood.
Queso, Jack,
Canis said, nodding to them each in turn. The elders looked at Jack with wary suspicion. Jack raised an eyebrow to Canis, who shrugged as if to say, I don't know why you're here either. One elder stepped forward. Her hair had lost any traces of yellow, replaced entirely by silver, and the remaining red hair had lost its luster. It was hard to tell age with something as alien as the Chiandier, but the elder looked ancient. Probably older than Jack was.
You are the human named Jack,
the elder said.
Okay. I think I was hearing Queso earlier.
I am Novus.
She gestured to the door of the hut.
2 days ago, Pash began the rebirth. He has since stalled, his body resisting the change. If he does not progress soon, he will die. He was not ready,
one of the elders snapped. These things are never certain, Queso said calmly.
Okay, got it.
Pash had...
So Queso's the younger, stronger female. And Sextus, here we go. Just a little bit further.
It wasn't what was best for the tribe,
Sextus said simply.
Hatha was a brilliant and strong war leader, and the tribe needed him as an elder more than it needed me as a war leader. So I charged the wyvern while one of my fellow warriors ordered the retreat.
He sounds awfully similar to Canis, so I gotta figure out how to separate them some more.
Of course, being 5 feet tall, sitting...
Okay.
Thank you for staying another night,
Novus said, as Jack approached.
We discussed your presence here late into the evening, and concluded that since we cannot deduce why you were brought here, we should allow you to leave and discover a way forward on your own.
I was going to do that anyway,
Jack said.
Yes, but we questioned what else to tell you before leaving.
He shrugged.
I'm all ears.
She smiled, her own not inconsiderable incisors being revealed by the action. She smiled, her own not inconsiderable sizers being revealed by the action. I don't think that's the right tone either. She smiled, her own not inconsiderable incisors being revealed by the action. There we go.
You are an oddity to our tribe, a human who is unafraid of us and respects our ways. But you also have power in you. At first, we attributed it to the ability you displayed when you took Pash beyond the boundary of death, but we have since realized it is more than that. To put it simply, we do not wish to make an enemy of you, Jack.
Jack's bushy eyebrows rose.
I wasn't planning on it, Elder. And while I appreciate that you think I have some sort of power, all I care about is getting to Parma and finding my family. Don't suppose you could help me out on that front?
Of course. Queso?
Queso stepped forward and nodded to Jack.
I can give you some knowledge to write into your tome that might assist you on your voyage.
I can do that?
He asked. He brought his tome into being and found a blank page. As soon as he thought about needing to write down some notes, the shoddy chunk of charcoal he'd used to X out the notifications portion of his tome appeared in his hand.
Well, how about that?
He muttered. He started to write a header for his notes, but as soon as he drew his first letter, a paper flashed into his vision, followed by the hunk of charcoal transforming into a poorly sharpened pencil. New general skill learned. Writing. Skill level 12. Tier 1. All right, so I'm pretty sure every character has a different snarky spectator. Is that right?
Yeah, Jax had a somewhat military feel.
Oh, right. Right. I think I remember. Let me make sure of it. Make sure I get it right. Oops, no. Here we go.
Yeah, you get a nice little chunk of it speaking in Jack's chapter in book one when it gives him a rundown on Coyote.
Looks like Death is Life has some right at the beginning of that chapter as well.
Abilities gained. Any last words? Temporary.
Death comes for us all. Upon witnessing the death of a sentient creature according to its own cultural beliefs as a direct consequence of the creature's personal choice or through natural causes, you gain fluency in that creature's primary language.
Okay, so it's kind of like a old World War II documentary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or not a documentary, but like when you would go to the movies back then, there would be like news reports. That would be like how people got their news when they went to the theater, and that would come before the movie, and that's kind of the tone I'm going for.
Tier 1. Tier 1.
How did you get to almost 100 years old with a barely functioning writing ability? Your dog must have eaten a lot of your homework. Your dog must have eaten a lot of Your dog must have eaten a lot of homework.
Tier 1 bonus. Decreased chance of writing being misunderstood. Scales with level through to... Scales with level through to... Scales with level through to end of Tier 2.
Since this skill predates your arrival in Arenia, it has been set at a level commensurate with the practical ability you already possess.
750 XP earned. Cumulative.
Jackass, Jack grumbled. He flipped to the notifications page and redrew a big X through the section.
There. No more horse crap from you.
He looked up, only to discover everyone staring at him slack-jawed.
What's everyone looking at? Friend Jack, Canis said, did you just turn off your notifications? Yeah. Why? If you can't see your notifications, how will you know what you have done? What you are capable of doing? Jack shrugged. I'll know, 'cause I'll be doing it.
Queso stuttered, hesitant to ask her next question, before finally saying, Jack, do you even know your base stats?
You mean the list with all your strength and stuff? Yeah, I've got it here somewhere. Didn't seem like much use, so I ignored it.
He flipped through his tome and found the page they were talking about. It seemed like it had more stuff on it than he remembered, but it was still a bunch of gobbledygook, so he showed it to them anyway.
John Jack Milsom. Renown, level 16, unclassed. Species, human. Age, 95. Experience, 65,000. Experience to next level, 4,900. Base attributes. Strength, 20. Constitution, 22. Endurance, 24. Dexterity, 22. Willpower, 24. Intelligence, 19. Charisma, 13. Luck, 32. Average, 22. Abilities. Boon. Deus Ex Machina. Any last words? Temporary. Speak with the dying. Temporary. Threat assessment. Traits. Well-aged. Evolving. Human. Self-defense. Sure-footed. General skills. Tier 2. Climbing, 22. Dodge, 22. Rope use, 23. Tier 1. Animal handling, 12. Jumping, 11. Survival skills. Tier 3. Fishing, 30. Hiking, 38. Sense danger, 33.
Sorry to jump in. You said well-aged in an odd spot there. I'm not sure if there's a different... If you go to...
General... Tier 1. And...
Wait a minute.
Tier 2.
Just a little bit before.
Traits. Well-aged. Evolving.
Is that well-aged written in there?
Yeah, it's under traits.
Is it just at the top of the list, or is it at the bottom as well?
It's just at the top.
Okay. I think I moved to the alphabetical and put it at the bottom there. In
You want that at the bottom?
Yeah. So it should go evolving, self-defense, sure-footed, well-aged.
Evolving. Human. Self-defense. Sure-footed. Sure-footed. Well-aged. General...
Done.
Sense danger, 33. Tier 2. Campcraft, 23. Orienteering, 25. Snares, 21. Weapon skills. Tier 1. Fists, 18. Tier 0. Improvised weapons, 3. Shields, 3. Fighting styles. Tier 2. Judo, 27. Jiu-Jitsu, Japanese, 20. Tier 1. One-handed weapons, 12. Active quests, get to Pallmeyer.
So what, did he take jiu-jitsu and, was he like in the, was he in the Pacific Theater of World War II?
No, he was. But I think my voice is doubled for some reason.
Oh, yeah, one sec. Let me, yeah. There we go.
I had my first judo instructor learned his judo in a World War II prison camp. He was an Indonesian. So that's kind of where he had a particularly brutal form of judo that he used, that he taught, that you could never use in competition. But that's where it comes from.
Gotcha. Cool. I love that. I love that the little detail. Jack is by far my favorite character in this. His action brought a chorus of grunts and whines from the Cheandier. If Jack didn't know better, he'd have said they looked embarrassed.
Jack, you cannot do that,
Novus exclaimed. Do what? Do what?
Expose your full character sheet. Perhaps humans strip naked and pleasure themselves in the street, but that is not our way. Perhaps humans strip naked and pleasure themselves in the street, but that is not our way.
It's just a bunch of numbers.
It is...
Oh, Queso.
It is far more than that,
Queso said firmly. Then she cocked her head, and the color of her fur undulated once.
Since you did show it, though, did my eyes see correctly? You have only 16 levels of renown and no class, yet your base average is 22.
And your luck, Canis said. It is so high. Now we know how you were able to survive discovery by my warband.
Jack grimaced at the words.
Trust me, my luck ain't all it's cracked up to be. Hell, I don't even know what's considered normal in this place.
Queso and Novus exchanged glances, neither wanting to say anything.
Yeah, I'm from another planet,
he said, waving off their obvious discomfort.
You clearly worked it out, and while it probably ain't something I want to be spreading around, who are you gonna tell? You live in the middle of a forest and eat anyone who might care. You live in the middle of a forest and eat anyone who might care.
You admit it?
Novus said with surprise.
You truly are a legend?
Sure, whatever you want to call it.
Canis looked shocked.
You impress me, Jack. What the hell for? I didn't do anything. I was all set to eat too much turkey and fall asleep in front of a football game when I got picked up and chucked into this forest. That ain't any more impressive than you being born a hairy bastard. That ain't any more impressive than you being born a hairy bastard.
Canis grinned and gripped Jack's shoulder.
You are wise, friend Jack. A Chiandir is the sum of their actions, not their birth. You are no different. But that doesn't change the fact that you have the potential to accomplish great things, just as every Chiandir has the potential to one day become an elder.
The sight of Sextus rolling his eyes behind Canis's back left Jack feigning a coughing fit to keep a straight face.
All right,
he said when he got himself under control.
Now that we got that out of the way, what say you give me some info about the terrain around here? High luck or not, I'm pretty sure I'll need more than that to get to Palmetto, so any help is appreciated. High luck or not, I'm pretty sure I'll need more than that to get to Palmetto, so any help is appreciated.
We would be honored,
Novus said. Right away, the Chiandir began giving him a detailed description of what he'd need to know, each of them contributing based on their own points of view and life experiences. It was interesting to hear them discuss the area. Canis had the most recent knowledge, but elders Novus and Queso had also been war leaders, so their understanding was similarly comprehensive. Not only were they able to give him an idea of the terrain in the area, but he was even able to make some crude maps. Meanwhile, Sextus largely kept silent, but the pieces of information he did supply were more practical. A safe place to sleep, a border to be cautious of, a plant with a contact toxin. It didn't take long to work out that when Sextus spoke, he was worth listening to. Once the Chiandir finished with the area's topography, they moved on to the threats he would encounter. Specific creatures, yes, but also sentient species he should avoid. There was a little dissent on that front, but they all agreed that Jack's safest route was to head northwest until he reached a river, then follow the cliffs that rose above its bank as it flowed west towards Palmyre. Excuse me. They were emphatic that he not head due north to reach the river, however. Apparently, that would take him to a series of waterfalls that culminated in a lake where some kind of water creature called an Ogopogo lived. Given how they described the thing, Jack had no intentions of disregarding their advice. They also advised that he stay on this side of the river, as a bunch of scouts had gone missing on the north bank, and until they worked out what happened, it was best to avoid taking any chances. Unfortunately, Jack could only manage their recommended northwesterly route if he split the difference between two hostile tribes of creatures. One of them was a group of strange, teleporting creatures that would ambush you and then disappear just as quickly. Little was known about them other than that they always attacked in pairs, were incredibly annoying to fight, and didn't have enough meat on them to justify the effort. The other group of creatures was some kind of semi-sentient plant life, but the Cheandier had even less information about them because of the lack of clarity on whether they were animals or vegetables. Rather than think too hard about whether that particular foe was cookpot. Rather than think too hard about whether that particular foe was cookpot eligible, the Cheandier simply opted to ignore them. That didn't mean they were harmless, though. They had several life stages, each with varying levels of threat, but the Cheandier's unintentional truce with the creatures had left them lacking details on their advanced stages of development.
"All right. Sounds like I got a plan laid out,"
Jack said when the briefing was finished. It wasn't perfect, but he'd done more with less. Hefting his pack onto his shoulder, he looked at the Cheandier.
"Never been one for big goodbyes, so guess that's that. Thanks for not eating me."
Oh, man.
About your potential,
Novus said before he could leave.
There is an offer we would like to make you.
Jack squinted at the Cheandier elder. She hadn't said a lot so far, and given how she was talking right now, Jack felt like she was building up to something significant.
Yeah? What'd you have in mind?
The old Cheandier drew herself erect, pushing away the weight of her many years as best she could.
Jack Milsom, human legend, we would offer you the blood of the Cheandier.
He had no idea what in the Sam Hill she was talking about. Damn it.
The Cheandier.
He had no idea what in the Sam Hill she was talking about.
Your blood? Why would I want that? I ain't a vampire.
Novus looked like she was going to attack him.
You would joke about such an honor, after all we have done for you.
It wasn't just Novus who reacted adversely. All of the Cheandier spat and swore in various levels of outrage. All except Sextus.
Friend Jack is new to this world, he admonished. We are his only source of knowledge. His ignorance is our offense, not his. Yet you chatter like scouts who have never left the village?
The old warrior's words cut through his fellow Cheandier's indignation, their offense muted through shame, if not through wisdom. Sextus turned to Jack.
As a human, you possess a trait that lets you take in some of the essence of other species, so long as it is freely given. Our people call this essence the blood of the Cheandier. This is not uncommon. For most species, blood is the medium through which essence is transferred, though there are some exceptions. It is also through this essence that a human may evolve into a different species, should they acquire enough of a given species' essence.
Jack nodded in understanding.
Yeah. I kind of remember the lizard mentioning something about that. No thanks, I'm good with being human.
Novus shook her head.
Do not fear, friend Jack. We have no intentions of adding you to our tribe. We make this offer because there are benefits to accepting even a fraction of another species' essence. Accepting the blood of the Cheandier might aid you in returning to your family.
That gave Jack pause. As much as he found the idea distasteful, any veteran knew that the line between survival and death was razor thin.
And you say I'll still be human if I do this? You will, Sextus promised. A human's expressed species is determined by their dominant essence, even if that changes over time. Right now, your essence is entirely human. If you accept our gift, 1/10 of that essence will become Cheandier. This will not affect your species, as your predominant essence will remain human. Over time, you may choose to take on essence from other species, but you will continue to be a human so long as you retain more human essence than any other. Over time, you may choose to take on essence from other species, but you will continue to be a human so long as you retain more human essence than that of any other species. And then what? And start growing hair, or scales, or whatever, and turn into something else? No, Sextus said. Even then, you would have to undertake a quest to complete the change. However, if you did not accept the quest, you would suffer ill effects until you brought your essence back into balance.
Jack planted his hands on his hips and frowned. Then he thought about it some more and shook his head, chuckling to himself.
Look at me, getting my knickers all twisted over something I didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago. Yes, I'd be honored to accept your gift. But first, I want to offer an apology. I offended you folk with my reaction when you first brought this up. It wasn't my intention, and I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Jack,
Novus said. She withdrew an ornamental bone knife from a sheath at her belt and held it out to Queso.
Are you able to perform the ceremony? I am old. I haven't the strength.
You honor me, Queso said, taking the knife.
There's a ceremony?
Jack asked, picturing the long masses his Catholic wife had forced him to sit through.
Oh, hell. Do we really have to...
Queso abruptly slashed her palm and grabbed his forehead, her still powerful hand nearly encompassing his entire cranium. Immediately, Jack's mind was assaulted with a flash of images as the moments of greatest import to Queso's Chiandir identity roiled through him, their order dictated by importance, not chronology. Her birth, her first hunt, wielding a weapon, the birth of her first child. On and on they went. When they got to the most climactic moments of her life, her transitory moments from scout to warrior and warrior to elder, Jack's stomach dropped like he was going over the edge on a roller coaster, only to jerk back to consciousness as the ritual came to a close. Okay, let me try something here.
We really have to... Oh, hell. Do we really have to...
Queso abruptly slashed her palm.
There we go.
Close.
Maybe, actually, let me... Whoop.
Do we really have to...
Queso abruptly slashed her palm and grabbed his forehead. Her still powerful hand near came to a close. Jack opened his eyes and blinked. His body was humming, but Queso was unconscious and halfway to the ground, the back of her coat tight in Canis's grip to keep her from falling the rest of the way. The large war leader inspected Jack's state, and once he was satisfied that the essence transfer had concluded, he hefted Queso off the ground and tossed her over his shoulder like a sack of grain. A paper appeared. Jack tried to bat it aside, but this time it dodged out of the way, refusing to be dismissed. He sighed. The damn thing was magic, so it would probably keep dodging until the cows came home.
No point tilting at windmills, he thought, plucking it out of the air. Essence of the Chiandir acquired. Essence of the Chiandir acquired.
You started to change your pronunciation of Chiandir.
Did I?
Yeah.
Essence of the Chiandir acquired.
It out of the air.
At what point?
Essence of the...
Right here?
Yeah, pretty much just this section. It's like once you got... Just now, you kind of changed it. It's Chiandir.
Oh, is deer the stress there?
No,
Chiandir?
Chiandir. You've been going Chiandir. You've been stressing that A. Just in this time that you did it.
I'm sorry, which one is correct?
The earlier one, Chiandir, as
Okay,
opposed to Chiandir.
I gotcha.
Essence of the Chiandir. Essence of the Chiandir acquired. Essence of the Chiandir acquired.
There we go. For the first time in Arenia's history, the Chiandir people have bestowed a legend with the blood of the Chiandir. I feel like I'm continuing to do it. For the first time in Arenia's history, the Chiandir people have bestowed a legend with the blood of the Chiandir. As a result, you have received a trait that any soldier would sell a testicle for.
Reward unlocks the trial of the Chiandir trait. New trait acquired. Trial of the Chiandir.
Sorry.
Keep doing it. I don't know.
Yeah. Chiandir. So come down on deer.
Chiandir.
Yes.
Okay, so the stress, trying to like work out Chiandir. Okay, Chiandir.
Chiandir.
Reward unlocks the trial of the Chiandir trait. Trial of the Chiandir. New trait. Reward unlocks the trial of the Chiandir trait. New trait acquired. Trial of the Chiandir.
Upon death, you will have the option of undergoing a trial. Should you succeed, you will return to life, but be changed by the experience. Note, this trial is voluntary. If death is your wish, you may have it.
Requirements. Minimum 10% Chiandir essence. Minimum 10% Chiandir essence. Chiandir.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's right.
Minimum 10% Chiandir essence. If you successfully complete your trial, you will lose this essence and suffer undetermined penalties until you bring your total essence back to 100%. Current essence stats: human.
Status.
Current essence status: human, 90%. Chiandir, 10%.
Jack's voluminous eyebrows rose.
That's a hell of a gift, he said.
Even without knowing the bonuses and penalties, alive was usually preferable to dead.
Thank you kindly. I get that this ain't a little thing you're doing for me.
It is our pleasure, Jack. Truly,
Novus said.
If we are finished,
Sextus said to Novus, his hand coming down on Jack's shoulder. The Chiandir elder nodded, and Sextus gestured for Jack to follow him, walking on his hands until he was some distance away from the other Chiandir. Jack fell in behind him, noting that they came to a halt. Jack fell in behind him, noting when they came to a halt that the old warrior had not only taken them out of earshot, but also positioned himself so that his broad back obscured their conversation from the rest of the Chiandir. Fuck, ran out of breath. Jack fell in behind him, noting when they came to a halt that the old warrior had not only taken them out of earshot, but also positioned himself so that his broad back obscured their conversation from the rest of the Chiandir. Jack tilted his head.
What's going on?
He asked, lowering his voice.
I have something to give you, but also something to tell you. Look down with your eyes, but don't move your head.
Jack did so, despite not understanding why.
Do you see those plants with the 3 leaves? Do you see those plants with the 3 leaves?
The old Chiandir said, glancing at the ground between them. Jack followed his gaze and saw a distinctive plant with a thick shoot and broad, almond-shaped leaves. Almond-shaped.
Jack followed his gaze and saw a distinctive plant with a thick shoot and broad, almond-shaped leaves.
Sure,
he said, uncertain where the conversation was going.
There are 3 types of this plant, all with edible roots. From my understanding, 2 of those taste like a wyvern's bile sac, but the one with a white underside to the leaves is reasonably palatable. But the one with a white underside to the leaves is reasonably palatable.
Jack gave a tiny nod. This was invaluable information, but he was surprised Sextus would know about it, given the Chiandir's isolationism and zealotry for a carnivorous diet.
You will also find a number of trees with cones. All of them have seeds which can be eaten. Most grasses can be eaten in small amounts, but that is for the roughage. Most grasses can be eaten in small amounts, but that is for roughage, not nourishment. Don't eat any red berries. Some are edible, but most are poisonous, and I don't know which are which. If you find flecked stones with a purple vein running through them, you can scrape off some of that purple vein and use it to purify water. It can also be used on wounds to keep them from festering. I hope this information is helpful. It is all I know, but I would not have you die in the forest when I carry this knowledge.
Thank you, Jack said sincerely.
Though I'll admit that I'm curious where you learned this stuff.
Sextus shrugged.
Every year, a small number of scouts are selected to leave the tribe and never return. Instead, they must search far and wide to find another tribe who will take them in. If they manage to do this, they are welcomed with great fanfare, for the addition of one who can survive such a journey means strengthening the tribe overall. And the scouts are okay with getting tossed out on their ass like that? Indeed. It is a singular honor reserved for the scouts with the greatest potential, for the farther the scout travels to find a new tribe, the greater the honor to both their birth tribe and the tribe who takes them in. I'm guessing you were one of those scouts. Yes. I was also a fool. My pride was great, and I sought to travel farther than any Chiandir before me. For a long time I was successful, but eventually the rigors of the journey set in. I was attacked by a pack of egghounds, and though I managed to kill them, I was gravely wounded. Fortune came to my aid, though. It so happened that the pack had been scourging a small tribe of goblins. By the time I killed the egghounds, more than half the tribe had been killed. By the time I killed the egghounds, more than half the tribe had been killed and eaten. They took me in and healed me as a show of respect.
He shook his head.
I would never have thought such a thing possible from a plant-eater.
For a moment, Sextus stared off into the distance. Then he seemed to jerk free of his memory and gestured to the plants.
I was only there briefly and did not consume their plants, but I did learn some of their ways. That is the source of my knowledge. What do the others think about all that?
Jack asked, though he suspected he knew the answer.
I have never told my story to another Chiandir.
Sextus said, confirming Jack's suspicions. Excuse me. Actually, I need more water. Sextus said, confirming Jack's suspicions.
Although I am sure some have noticed that I do not partake in goblin flesh when they encroach upon our borders. Still, I am glad that my knowledge may be of use to you. It is an opportunity to pass along the kindness shown to me so many years ago.
Jack nodded. He was hardly a goblin expert, but he knew they were pretty much universally regarded as evil in fiction. I'm scraping my necklace with my cords here. That said, no matter how much crossover there was between the world of Arenia and the fantasy settings of Earth literature, it was important to remember that the two weren't the same. If Jack wanted to survive, he'd have to approach each new species without preconceived prejudices.
Thanks for sharing. I mean it. It'll help a lot. I could probably survive solely on meat for a little while, but I gotta be honest. I haven't crapped since I got to Arenia. Pretty sure that ain't healthy.
Sextus somehow managed to contort his thick-skulled, sloth-baboon face into a wry grin.
You are probably correct. Now, I have a gift for you.
I want to go listen to how I did his voice at the very beginning here.
We are his only source as a human.
Okay, just making sure I'm getting...
I have a gift for you.
Sextus took a rucksack off his shoulder and opened it, pulling out some kind of long bone. At a glance, Jack wasn't sure what to make of it. Roughly a meter in length, it had a broad, misshapen head at one end, while the other end was wrapped in leather and clearly meant to be a handle. The closest comparable Jack could come up with was some kind of bone hurley stick. Bone hurley stick, what is that? Hurley stick. Oh, interesting. Hurling stick also is what it's called, which is an Irish sport, hurling. Looks kind of like half of a hip bone on the end of a stick. The closest comparable Jack could come up with was some kind of bone hurley stick, but the comparison was ruined by the bulbous growths of thick calcium on the backside of the paddle that could easily focus on... Excuse me. The closest comparable Jack could come up with was some kind of bone hurley stick, but the comparison was ruined by the bulbous growths of thick calcium on the backside of the paddle that could easily focus any force delivered with the weapon. Let's try that one more time. The closest comparable Jack could come up with was some kind of bone hurley stick, but the comparison was ruined by the bulbous growths of thick calcium on the backside of the paddle that could easily focus any force delivered with the weapon to a deadly degree.
This club is made from the wing bone of the wyvern that nearly killed me,
Sextus said, holding it out to Jack. He took it and was immediately surprised at how light it was. Sextus smiled.
As with all dragonkin, the bone is light but very strong. An iron sword would dull itself on that weapon before cutting through it. Don't you lose a lot of power with something this light?
Jack asked as he swung it back and forth. He'd had to use the butt of his rifle in hand-to-hand combat once during the war, and the incident had showed him how... He'd had He'd had to use the butt of his rifle in hand-to-hand combat once during the war, and the incident had shown him. He'd had to use the butt of his rifle in hand-to-hand combat once during the war, and the incident had shown him just how important a weapon's weight was in melee.
On the contrary, much of the power comes from the leverage you create when you swing the weapon and the point where you make contact. If you hit here,
he pointed to the edge of the flat face.
Or here,
he pointed to the rear of the head,
you will cause significant trauma. What if I hit with the flat part?
Jack asked. Sextus bared his teeth in a Chiandier grin, but didn't answer, even after Jack raised an inquisitive eyebrow. Even after Jack raised an inquisitive eyebrow. Jack was starting to suspect that there was more to Sextus than the old Chiandier Jack was starting to suspect that there was more to Sextus than the old Chiandier Jack was starting to suspect that there was more to Sextus than the old Chiandier warrior let on.
Thanks for this,
Jack said, hefting the club in his hand.
Probably best if I don't go wander in the woods with just a pocket knife. Certainly not. Speaking of your knife, that blade you arrived with is no tool for a warrior. We placed a new one in your bag and gave your old one to the children to play with.
Jack snorted. On Earth, they wouldn't let a kid play with a bag... On Earth, they wouldn't let a kid play with a bag of grapes. Apparently, Chiandier young'uns had a childhood a lot closer to his own.
Thanks again,
Jack said before turning back to Jack said before turning back to Canis and Novus.
All right. You folks done coming up with ways to keep me from leaving? All right. You folks done coming up with ways to keep me from leaving?
Canis barked out a laugh, his teeth showing in a Chiandier grin. Canis barked out a...
That is all, friend Jack. May you hunt well and find your tribe.
Elder Novus also raised a hand in parting before heading back to the village, Canis accompanying her with the still unconscious Queso slung over his shoulder. Jack turned to Sextus and slapped him on the shoulder.
All right, old man. All right, old man. All right, old man. Hope you ain't dead if I pass through here again. Hope you ain't dead if I pass through here again.
I find that exceedingly unlikely, Sextus answered.
You mean me coming through here, or you living to see it?
Sextus bared his teeth in a Chiandier grin.
Till we meet again, friend Jack, in this world or the next.
Jack nodded and gave him a wave, then headed away from the village. He still had a long way to go, but at least he knew there were some good folk on Arenia. He still had a long way to go, but at least he knew there were some good folk on Arenia. And for that, he was thankful. All right, cool. So we made it through chapters 2 and 3. We will save some more of it for next time. Let's see. I'm at about... Oh, wow. I'm only at about 10% of the book, though. So, yeah. So the next 3 cold reads are going to be longer. They're going to be about 2.5 hours each, I think. That should bring us up to 30% by Wednesday. But, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming to hang out with me while I narrated this. I had a bunch of fun. I'm glad to be back into Jack. He's easily my favorite. So, yeah, we're starting on Chapter 4 on Monday. I'm going to go for, I think I'm going to try for 11 a.m. Central instead of noon. I think I think that'll give me enough time to get 2.5, 3 hours in. But, yeah,
you guys have a good weekend. Check the description below for links to all sorts of stuff, such as Book 1. If you haven't listened to that already, that's still on Audible. And I'm going to be putting the link to Book 2 on Kindle in the description below. Or maybe I'll just use the other link that Paul gave me. But anyway, check the description below for things like, the website, the newsletter, and also don't forget Small Chests Are Fine Too, and Everybody Loves Large Chests Volume 8 just came out yesterday. And Small Chests Are Fine Too is exclusive to our platform. That's the only way you can get it. And it's got the classic audiobook version and the first episode of the cinematic audio version in there. So be sure to go check that out. The first episode of that cinematic audio is free. Anyway, y'all have been great. Once again, have a good weekend, and hopefully I'll see you Monday. Bye.